We are back with the 10 tenets of difficult conversations. Tenet 3 is be open to changing, and 4 is get surrounded. Rob, what's going on with these?
Yeah. Yeah. People are like, can we get to how to have it? We'll get there. We'll get to the
Get
actual
there.
structure of the conversation. But these two were big. And this is all about, as I said in our last installment, that these conversations are a big deal because they involve typically people or relationships or identities that are important to us. And so anything that we can do to encourage people to have a whole perspective on what these conversations look like. So these two, be open to changing. This is a funny thing because I think this is a part of the human reality of being clear about what it is that you want, which means that you get clear about what it is you want to see happen in this conversation. We talked last time about be clear about what you want to see happen, but let go of the outcome, which I know that's a fundamental paradox. But at the same time, remaining open to the possibility that you may not see it completely right. Be open to and it's and I'm not saying crowdsource, or I'm not saying lead by consensus. Like that's what people do. They're like, everybody needs to have a say in it. And I'm like, this is about you being clear, which is so difficult for people in tough conversations. And at the same time, maintaining a willingness to not just argue against yourself, but to actually see that I may have this wrong in part.
Yeah.
And so that's the challenge, is to be clear, to be on purpose, but at the same time be open. Because if I don't even know what to do with a reality, if someone came to me in a conversation, they were just like, here's what I need to tell you, here's what you're doing wrong, here's what has to change. Because a person who approaches it like that is really tough. And so if I'm being that way, I think being open to change. And then the next one about getting surrounded is this is why, I mean, Tim, nothing for me is as simple as just having the conversation. These conversations are easier if you are surrounded by people who occupy different roles in your life.
Right?
And so, if my wife and I go through a season, we've never had difficulty in marriage. It's just so easy for us. But if we go through a season, one of my best friends was always there to tell me this. He said, marriage goes in seasons. And but also he's someone who in the midst of being one of my closest friends and affirming me and encouraging me, will also stand up for my wife. Do you know what I mean? With me in ways that, and so I don't know why I always go to marriage relationships, but I think it's this great example that transcends into other things. It's like, even if you're in a conversation with your boss, do you have people around you who give you tough but important feedback about how that's like, so that you see that other person's perspective before you develop your own convictions? And so that's that. I think these two are related, to be open to changing and getting surrounded, because I think the being surrounded prior to this conversation, because also if you're surrounded, not just by tough feedback, but by people who affirm you, then you're probably going to go into this conversation in a more healthy, mature kind of way anyway.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, we all have a perspective, right? We all have a way that we see things, a way that we experience things, and we have biases that send us down a path when we experience certain stimuli, whether it's a one-time thing or over and over, like, oh, here we go again. I've seen this before. And you start jumping to conclusions so quickly. And you're absolutely right. If you had people to help you understand and see the full context, you probably make better decisions. But I love this be open to changing, right? So, Rob, you're super smart. I know that you probably know like 90% of all the information in the world. But if you only knew 50%,
oh my gosh,
right? You were aware of all 50% of the information in the world, you would still be completely unaware and uninformed about the other 50.
For sure.
Right? So we should go into these open to learning. Curiosity is a big deal for me, right? The kindness games, one of our first values is curiosity leads to self-control. And so if we can go in there with the problem statement, with what we think needs to change, curious, to why we're experiencing these problems. And actually, instead of accusing, give the floor over to the person who we're having the conversation to see where they're coming from and what they're dealing with, right? I mean,
Yeah.
life exists outside of the office. That could be an issue. Miscommunication on your part could definitely be an issue. Misunderstanding on their part could be an issue. And a lot of these things will come back to your ability to do whatever.
Yep.
And so understanding the fullness of their context as well, I think is huge.
Yeah. In these first 5 tenets, it's like, it almost seems it's kind of stepping back from this one conversation when we realize, gosh, I wish I had just done a lot of things better long before this occurred. And so much of the way we approach life is, here's your 3 steps. If you're doing this conversation, just get started now, but here's the 3 things to do. And what we're suggesting is that there's some preparatory pieces, because conversations, it's an acute moment where there's a lot of context around how you even got here in the first place to have this conversation. And so this openness to changing is a step back to say, to see it whole, and to realize that my capacity to have this conversation in this moment will be increased if I had actually spent the time to think more intentionally. This is what I'm about, is like, long before this ever occurred, about getting surrounded by people who will stretch me, support me, give me feedback, be role models and mentoring voices in my life. And so I think it sounds like hard work, but that's where we feel like if we develop this structure or architecture around our lives before we ever have this acute, in the moment conversation, it probably will go better. And I'm going to say it absolutely will go better. Is that a word? Absolutely.
Absolutely. It just sounds like you're Canadian a little bit.
Yes. We love that. Yes.
So nice. So nice. And the other thing is, if you're watching this video, you are probably one of the people that is hoping for a good outcome, a good relationship afterwards. And if you put in this pre-work, you do the self-examination, you consult with other people who have awareness of the situation and of the people and the dynamics around it, the chances of you coming across as not, hey, this is the last chance, but more as, this is an issue, I'm trying to wrap my head around it, here's how I understand it, but most importantly, we need to move forward. Yeah. That will be so much better received if the person doesn't feel like this is the first step to them being pushed out.
Yep.
Rather than this is the first step to moving past this and having a great working relationship.
Yep. And if we were to simplify these 4 into kind of so what's the practical advice? We would say, and I'm going back to the first 2 from our first time together.
Yep.
Document your purpose for being in it. Let go of the outcome. It's okay that you know what you want to see change, but let go of it for the sake of the conversation. Remain open to changing, that you may have something to learn from this or even possibly be wrong about. And then start building that network of support and feedback now. So that would be the practical advice to some of the things that we're describing, I think.
Wow.